So you may or may not have heard that a nine-tailed fox demon trapped in a ancient rock recently escaped from said rock somewhere in Japan, and no one knows where the hell the demon went. Well, my friends, I have for you a story of ancient Japanese lore as well as a story from my own clan that actually aligns with this particular tale. And I hope, my friends, that you will join me for said story. Grab a drink and grab a seat. I've got a story for you. So who was this woman? Well, she was Tamamo no Me, a beautiful and deceitful woman, but she was the human form of a nine-tailed fox demon who launched a plot to kill the emperor at the time, Emperor Toba. Now, this Tamamo broad is probably one of the most famous yokai in all of Japanese lore. She brought down the Shang dynasty, she caused economic depression and destabilization in India, and she made an outright nuisance of herself throughout most of Japanese history. Probably one of the most famous silver foxes in all of history, not withholding Zeus, and an honourable mention going to Kenny Rogers, Long Live the Gambler. Did he die? Is Kenny Rogers still alive? Somebody let me know here on screen. Excellent. Or not excellent. We'll work that out in post. As I said, she crumbled the Shang dynasty and she made an absolute nuisance of herself in India, causing economic depression all the way across. And then she found her way back into Japan to mess with our boy Toba. And it was in Emperor Toba that she found her match, or rather, Toba found his match in her. I know that's confusing, but allow me to explain. Tamamo took her human form to seduce the emperor, and for a while it worked. He was absolutely smitten with her and believed himself to be quite in love. Now, this is a very common tale in Japanese mythology. We find the Kitsune, the fox-like demon who takes the form of a beautiful woman and seduces a wise or powerful man. And the reason for this is always varied, it's always vague. Sometimes it's because they love to feed on the souls of someone who is powerful. Other times it's because the Kitsune fancied themselves the most powerful and wise of all of the yokai, of all of the demons. So they would do these power plays as a way of proving their dominance or stroking their own ego, if you will. And it makes them one of the most fascinating creatures and characters in all of Japanese mythology, because sometimes they're very wise advisors, they are the givers of knowledge and power, and other times they are these indomitable monsters that are to be feared and to be wary of. Now, there are a couple of different ways that this next part is told, but I'm going to go with my favourite version of the story, as I always do here in my tavern. Just before their wedding, yes, Toba and Tamamo were meant to be wed, but just before their wedding, a grey-eyed and white-haired sage found his way into the emperor's palace and advised the emperor to be wary of his love. And why? Because evil floated about her, and he insisted to the emperor that he should have their wedding on the full moon, but was cryptic as to why. Now, we, from the God's eye, know that yokai cannot disguise their form. Spirits cannot disguise their form under the power and light of the full moon. Even though he did not believe the sage, he still prepared. He prepared for the eventuality because he was, in fact, still a very wise leader. So what did he do? Well, he insisted that the wedding be moved a little bit further ahead. They wanted it on the full moon. Now, Tamamo did not protest this. She seemed quite fine with it, and that assured Toba. But being the wise man that he was, he prepared just in case. He had a charm prepared by a magician, and that charm would be the sealing fate should anything happen with his love, Tamamo. So the night of the wedding rolls around and all seems fair and well until the light of the full moon breaks its way through the clouds, and suddenly her visage began to melt away, and a fearsome silver fox with 9 elegant and terrifying tails came from beneath the melted flesh of Tamamo. And she prepared to strike, she prepared to assassinate, for it had always been her plan to assassinate him on her wedding night. With tears in his eyes and with a broken heart, Toba released the charm, and she was sealed temporarily within the charm. And he knew what he must do, so he rushed down from the moonlit hill where their wedding was to take place, to the beach of volcanic rocks, and he found there waiting for him the largest rope in his kingdom, which had been blessed with a holy water of moonlight. He bound the charm to the rope, and then the rope to the stone, and the volcanic stone then absorbed the soul of Tamamo. And there it rested and sat for the rest of time. Until that day some weeks ago when the stone was found split down its very middle, and the spirit of the fox nowhere to be found. Now, what actually happened to this stone? Well, there are logical explanations for what happened. There is the suggestion that water condensated on the stone and leaked down into the many cracks. And as the water leaked in and froze and expanded, and then more water leaked in, froze and expanded, it slowly split the stone in two. And that is a very right and logical way to look at the story. But it just so happens that the clan has a story very similar to this one that takes place in the same area right around in the same area that they would have called Tochigi in Japan. There was a great conflict between what we call a guardian and a serpent. Now, guardians are great spirits that align directly with a specific type of natural energy, and these were human embodiments of natural spirits. And that's a complex bit of storytelling that will have to come for another time. But these guardian spirits would be born once or twice a generation on every continent, and they are born understanding that they are members of what we call the Clan of the Black, or the Black Light. Because the way that creation exists within our stories is in a balance of dark light and light, or Solas and Solas Dove. This guardian would have been a leader in Japan around the time that this story took place. And around that same time, a great serpent arose. Now, serpent is a catch-all term that we use to refer to demons or fairies, but of a more negative connotation. Because there are fairies and demons and daemons and all other different types in folklore that are neutral or not necessarily bad. But when we refer to serpents, serpents are a consuming energy. Their sole and complete purpose is to consume life. And it just so happens that around this time, this guardian and this serpent found themselves both in love and in conflict. And right around that same time, this great leader found himself smitten with this creature. He could not understand why, and it was the great energy and power of this woman that had drawn in the leader, who, for sake of simplicity, we will call Toba. Toba found himself drawn to this magnificent woman whose beauty was beyond measure and her power was immeasurable. Those words mean the same thing, beyond measure and immeasurable. So she had beauty and power, immeasurable. And through it all, he knew that she was dangerous. He knew that she was something that was antithetical to life, but he still desired her. And he tried his very best to pull her away from her tendencies of taking life. But his first priority was to the natural order. His first priority was to his people. And unfortunately, she kept killing and destroying and bringing imbalance to the natural order of his domain. So he had no other choice but to imprison her. But while she was in prison, the land became poisoned, it became dark, it became unlivable. Now, a lot of this is contributed to sicknesses that come from the fumes from volcanoes, and while that may have been, that's not as fun of a story. So at the end of it all, Toba, of the story of the Clan of the Black, eventually found himself in a fight to the death on a hill of volcanic rock. And as he was about to kill her, instead he placed a charm upon her that would bind her soul inside of the stone. Now, in our clan, the way that energy is transmitted, the way that it is channeled is through certain wavelengths, and then it can be held within stones and metals and minerals, much like what we use today with batteries and wires and so on. There are ways to transfer energy through natural minerals. So a soul, theoretically, could be bound to a stone or to a piece of metal, or perhaps even into a crystal, though that gets to be a little bit wishy-washy when it comes to the science of it, if you will. Now, after binding the stone, his tears fell upon it, and a small crack appeared. And he said, "My tears have opened the window to your prison, and they will be the only thing that will open the door." Now, the natural spirit, the guardian spirit that Toba represents in this story is the guardian of storms or water. So it is interesting that the stone was split asunder by condensation, when in this story that's what caused the crack to begin with. Now, whether or not these things are true or whether they are not, who's to say and who's to know? Here in the tavern, we just tell stories. Do you have a version of this story that you know? Or do you have a story that is your favorite about a kitsune from Japan? If so, I would beg you to put it down in the kilt section below, that we may share each other's stories long after this one has ended. But now that her prison has been destroyed, what happens now? Will there be chaos in the kingdoms around the world? Will she show her face again? Only time will tell, my friend. But until next time, stay bloodthirsty, and I will see you the next time you wander in for a story. All hail.